Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the J-Word channel. So today I wanted to hop on and talk to you guys a little bit about how I've been feeling this year actually. 2020 has been one to remember, you guys. Let's just review a few things. World War III scares, Australia on fire, Kobe and Gigi's death, a worldwide pandemic, you guys. We're living through that shiz right now. A pandemic. To top all that off, there were things going on that people didn't even pay attention to because we were so concerned with the pandemic going on. There were UFO sightings this year. NASA confirmed UFO sightings. Nobody batted an eyelash. There were discoveries about a parallel universe where time runs backwards, but nobody's talking about that. We had murder hornets come to the US because, a pandemic and death and World War III and Australia on fire just wasn't enough. So let's add in some murder hornets, spice things up a bit, right? Then Anonymous returned. All of a sudden, they popped right back up, and here they are. 2020 has been filled with so many crazy things happening that it's almost funny and comical to look back on. And it's definitely going to be a year that people tell their grandkids about and that their grandkids will know about. It's just one of those years. We are living through history right now. And let me tell you, it's been cool, but it's been overwhelming. So when I say that we're living in history, I mean we are living in history. This will go down in history. It's crazy. And it's only June. However, there's a more important topic that I wanted to touch on, other than the murder hornets and Kobe and Gigi's death and World War III and the Australia fires and yada yada yada. There is a bigger topic that is 100 times more concerning, I think, than the coronavirus. And that would be the death, the murder of George Floyd. So let me just preface this by saying that if you don't know who George Floyd is, you definitely should by now, but if you don't for any reason, George Floyd was an African-American man who was killed, brutally murdered by a cop in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. Many say he had used a counterfeit $20 bill, hence his arrest, and his run-in with the law was extensive from before, and that he had drugs on him when he was arrested. But should that really matter? What's more important? The fact that a human being was killed in cold blood based on the color of his skin? Or the fact that a human that was killed in cold blood based on the color of his skin committed a crime? Which is more important to you? Now, I want to say if the first one is more important to you, the fact that a human being was killed in cold blood based on the color of his skin, not because he committed a crime, just based on the color of his skin, if you think that is okay, I need you to check your white privilege immediately. I was born half African American and half Caucasian, which means I'm half black and I'm half white. I'm mixed. I have two siblings. One brother who is a year older than me, and he is full African American, and a younger sister who is part Native American and Caucasian. So we are all dark-skinned kids. So we all grew up kids with dark skin and two white parents in a very white neighborhood, in a very white town, in a very white area. And that's just the truth. My brother and I have both experienced racism in our lives more than once. Racism and judgment. We both experienced things due to our ethnicity. Some of these experiences I'm going to share from a time that I didn't even know that racism existed, yet I still encountered it as a kid. So the first story I would like to share is the story of the fair. My brother and I were waiting in line for the Ferris wheel at the Fertile Fair, and it was just like any other day. Kids at the fair, we were very excited to ride all the rides, as many as we could in one day, eat all the junk food we could, and just enjoy being kids. At the time, I was about 7 years old, and my brother was about 8. While we were waiting in line for the Ferris wheel, we were next up to get into the Ferris wheel. But before we got in, the ride attendee had to let some kids out. The kids that were sitting in the Ferris wheel before us were all white, Caucasian little boys. Around the same age as my brother and I, maybe a little older. And I distinctly remember this, like it was yesterday. These kids saw my big brother, who, by the way, is a vulnerable adult, meaning he has special needs, he has disabilities, and he looks different than most kids. Not only because he's African American in a rural white community, but because of his disabilities. But because he is African American, he does have fuller lips. These kids started to point out his lips and started to laugh and giggle, and all I saw was them making fun of my brother. And that was not okay with me. So, unlike most kids my age who, would be scared of these other guys, I went right up to them, yelled at them for making fun of my brother, and ended up punching one of them in the nose. I didn't know at the time that they were making fun of my brother's ethnicity, the features of his face because of his ethnicity. I just knew that they were making fun of my brother and that wasn't okay. So I took a stand. The second incident that I can remember was when my brother and I were about 11 or 12, and we went to the gas station with my mom. We were riding our bikes there, and on the way back, my brother and I said that we would meet my mom at the house since we were way ahead of her anyway. And on the way back home, we were on the sidewalk, and a red car pulled up next to us. I looked over, the guy in the car rolled down his window, and he didn't look at me, he looked at my brother, my African American brother, and he asked if he knew where to get drugs in this town. Now again, remember, my brother is about 12 at this age and a vulnerable adult. And at that time, he was a vulnerable child, a child with disabilities, a child with special needs. And this man had asked my brother if he knew where to find drugs. At that age, I began to understand that not everybody likes people with darker skin. And at that age, I'd watched enough movies where African Americans were portrayed as drug dealers. African Americans were portrayed as the bad guys all the time in any movie I watched. And so I knew that this man wasn't asking my brother for drugs on a whim. He was asking him because he was African American. I obviously told the man that my brother did not know where to find drugs and did not have drugs and that he needed to leave. By this time, by the time I was talking to the man, my mom had noticed a car had pulled over and started talking to my brother and I, and she told him to go. And the man sped off. That was an experience I will never forget. It stuck with me for a long time, and it still does to this day. The third incident I want to share is my personal experience that I've had with racism. One of them, I should say. When I was in 8th grade, I was in history class. We were just talking about the time frame where blacks were slaves. And we happened to go over African American history. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I am adopted, and I have 2 white parents. However, that day at school, my teacher had made a joke. She said that my parents had purchased me off of the black market. And I laughed. I thought, wow, that's so funny. That's hilarious. I didn't think, wow, that was racist. I thought it was funny. To this day, I still joke about that. I say, my parents bought me off the black market because I thought it was the funniest joke ever. But really, it stuck with me. I didn't realize it then, but the joke she made was racist. And I was forced to laugh about it because everyone else in the class thought it was funny, so I should think it's funny too. The entire class, all white, I might add, except for myself, laughed. So I laughed with them. I think that it was easier for me to, because at this point I understood racism, I understood what it was and what it meant, but it was easier to laugh it off rather than think that somebody I knew, somebody I trusted, somebody I learned from made a racist remark. So I went with it. The most vivid encounter I can remember in regards to encountering racism in my life was when I was in 9th grade. We were talking about how the slaves used to be black. And this kid in my class decided it would be funny and entertain everyone if he could get a rise out of me. So during this class, my history teacher needed to leave the room, so she did. And when she left, he decided to make a joke. He had basically told me that these were my ancestors and I should be out there picking cotton. And that I wasn't. This was the first time I had heard anybody call me the N-word. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I thought I should just stay quiet. I shouldn't say anything back to him. I should just let it be because it's not a big deal. But something inside of me said that it was a big deal and that I need to stand up for myself. And so I did. After that class, I took him out into the hallway and I kicked his ass. I punched him, I threw him down on the ground, and I knew at that moment violence was not the answer. I knew violence wasn't the answer. But it's the only thing I could think of at the time and at that age. Got called into the principal's office and the principal called my dad. So I'm sitting there and I explained to the principal, he goes, "What happened?" I go, "Well, he called me the N-word, so I beat him up." Principal sat there for a while, nodded his head, thought about it for a second. I thought I was about to get the worst punishment of my life. Instead, he said, "Okay, go to your next class." And I wasn't punished. Because he knew it was wrong. He knew it was wrong. And I'm forever grateful that he understood my point of view and he understood why I did what I did. What I didn't understand was that the boy who had called me the N-word received no punishment at all. There were no repercussions for his actions. And that really bothered me. And still does to this day. Now, this last encounter that I've had was very, very recent. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a guy I had met. And we had chatted for a few days here and there, and he was super nice and friendly, and, we got along. And I thought, hey, this could go somewhere, and I was really excited about it. And I didn't realize it until it had happened. But he assumed my ethnicity. There was a night we were going back and forth, kind of asking each other questions about each other, and he had asked if I could speak Spanish. And when I told him, no, I can't speak Spanish. I mean, I can say a couple of words. That's about it. I thought you were Hispanic. I said, no. He goes, well, what ethnicity are you? I said, I'm African American and I'm Caucasian. And after I sent that message, he responded with, I don't think this is going to work. sorry. And he stopped talking to me after that. So it was pretty blatantly clear that the reason he did not want to talk to me or interact with me any longer is because I was half African American. I felt less than. So I had to take a step back because in my head those thoughts were going through, and the only thing I could think was, what in the world are you thinking? First of all, I don't want to be with somebody who can accept my race. And secondly, I don't want to be somebody who feels less than ever. And I refused to let him get me to think that way. I refused. So, those are my stories. Those are the big stories, the ones that impact you as a human being, the ones that you remember, even as a 7 or 8-year-old, the ones that really get to you. Those are the big ones. But trust me, there have been very minute, very small moments in life where my brother, my sister, and I have all experienced racism in more ways than one. And that is not okay. Most of the family that I have, relatives, close family friends, don't even know that my brother and I have encountered so many racist remarks or judgments. And the reason that is because we don't tend to talk about them a lot in my family. We tend to shy away from that topic because it makes other white people uncomfortable to tell them these stories. It makes them uncomfortable because all of a sudden they're feeling guilt or shame because it's something that somebody within their own race said, and they take on that guilt, that shame as their own because they're white as well. Now, I don't think that there's anything for you to be ashamed of or feel guilty about or beg for forgiveness about if you are white and you're a good person and you are not racist. That's great. Be that person. Continue being that person. But don't let a few people within your own race make you feel guilty about racism. Because not all white people are bad, and I know this to be true. I really do.